The decimation of Hollywood by AI is in full swing. You probably heard about the Disney and OpenAI contract. $1 billion invested. Everybody's remixing everything with everyone in it. Everything's a cinematic universe. And if you do want to follow Dylan Curious on Sora, you can see this. This is my remix for Meerkat Manor, The Reunion. It's a show I've always dreamed of happening in my mind, and I know it's not possible. But with AI, anything's possible. The nostalgia, my childhood, love it. Google's agentic AI tool Antigravity has been wiping some people's hard drives. And honestly, it's not so surprising that it's making mistakes, but I just find it surprising that it thought for 25 seconds and then for another 7 seconds and then it was like, I'm deeply sorry. This was a critical error on my part. I'm very sorry. Forgive me. I mean, how is this something that exists that isn't biological? You know, it's just blows my mind. We'll look at an interesting explanation for why Boston Dynamics robot gets up like that. And I'll introduce you to MIRO-U. This is a new 6-armed robot. So yeah, the Chinese were like, hey, we could just beat the Americans by getting 30% more out of our humanoids by just adding more arms. The bottom hands can hold a box and the top ones can do precise work and put things in the box. It actually makes sense. It's just freaky. Dissect Rohan Mystery's article, The End of the AI Era, the silent event that will change humanity forever. Looking at Guile Crouch's thoughts on why AI is an utter mess right now and what it means when for the first time in history, a technology is actually moving too fast for the culture to adapt to. We gotta give some attention to these analog AI chips. They popped up a few times over the last year, and I keep thinking, it's kind of like when you compute with light. Is it a joke? Is it like the next quantum? And I think this is a thing. So let's get on the same page with it. And look at Faison Shoghair's article. This Chinese chip doesn't care about zeros and ones, and that's its superpower. The world keeps arguing over GPUs and Moore's Law, but China's new analog chip quietly says, I'll take it from here. The Future of Life Institute has the new AI Safety Index. You probably won't be surprised, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good news. Looks like the best we got here is a C+ from Anthropic. This is literally the report card for the Singularity. And there's some F's in there. Looking at you, XAI, Meta, DeepSeek, Z.AI, and Alibaba Cloud. There's only one A- on the whole report card, and that's just Anthropic information sharing. Wish it was safety frameworks from everyone. Fascinating new work with virtual populations that are generated by multimodal AIs in all sorts of microenvironments, like scaling tumor microenvironments. Just another one of those caught me off guard moments. For better or worse, it turns out that AI can pick up on cultural values by mimicking how children learn. There's some researchers harnessing AI to solve major roadblocks in the solid-state battery technology space. And Arthur Brooks has a way to bring us all back to the real world just a little bit with a management Anti-Fad that will last forever, and we should all implement it now. But first, if you wouldn't mind going to your YouTube app, swiping left on the comments underneath this video, and you should see a hype button. My hope is that if we can keep getting a bunch of hypes, it'll help content like this stand out, just so you know it's not for everybody. It's for smaller creators like me. You only get to press that button 3 times a week. It has to be on a video that's less than 7 days old. But if you press it on this video, that might help me. Help me increase this number, 210 hypes. That translates into almost 200,000 hype points. That's the goal. Actually, side note, as long as we're here, by the end of the year, it'd be awesome to get to 30,000 subscribers. That might be a little too much, but if you guys haven't subscribed yet, that would be super cool to start 2026 with 30K subs. Maybe should we make it a goal to get to 100,000 before the Singularity? Ooh, I don't know. It could go either way, really. All right, Walt Disney is not going to let the AI revolution pass them by. They're sitting on some incredible IP. They first, invented the animated movie, and then they bought the company Pixar that invented the computer-generated movie. They pioneered theme parks. They copied Netflix. So what's next for them? Well, they said, I think Sam Altman's our guy. Here's $1 billion. Here is access to our IP. All right, so I have a couple thoughts about this. First off, it was interesting hearing the Disney CEO talk about how he tried to make a deal with Google, but they couldn't work it out, and then he ended up doing it with OpenAI. It does seem like doing it with Google would have made a lot of sense, but now that you've got this sort of Sam Altman thing happening, I think about Sora, and I think about just being able to generate all of the Disney IPs in whatever way I want, but of course they'll have filters to try to keep it in line with the brand. And then they talk about taking that content and also putting it in Disney Plus. So then what does that mean? Does that mean that Disney Plus turns into an app that's similar to a social network and it's going to be short form in the way Sora is? Or is this just the first step down something where it is more potentially horizontal, long form storytelling where you swap your face out and there's maybe a lot of prompts in the background that keep it sort of a high quality story? I don't know, but it's fascinating to see this happen. I kind of thought Disney wasn't going to partner with anyone and try to roll out their own solution. They're just so big. But you know what? Sam Altman knows how to make deals. Got to give him credit for that. And I think Sora is kind of fun. I mean, I have been spending less time on it recently, but I was thinking about how fun it would be to make Meerkat Manor into a reality show. Well, it was a reality show. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like a decade ago, but I loved it. And I got really invested in all these little meerkats and their lives. And now the show's gone. And honestly, I don't even know how long meerkats live. They're probably dead now. But I would love to see a reunion of the Whiskers family, which is the name of the meerkats, if you don't know. And it just would be so fun. So I was like, I'm just going to use AI to make Meerkat Manor the reunion. And this video just kind of tickled me. It is cool to be able to make content like this sometimes. And I got a feeling a bunch of fans of Marvel will do a better job than the actual Disney executives at creating awesome stories, battles between superheroes in ways that they just would have never funded before. Of course, I've got a bigger problem with this AI being used for entertainment in the first place when it's so powerful, but that aside, assuming we don't care about that, this is pretty neat. I mean, this guy doing selfies with all of these famous actors from different movies is just... it's just a hint as to what's possible. Like the crossovers, like it's the Sora cinematic universe is everyone. All humans on Earth, all historical characters, all IP at some point. I mean, Jack Sparrow sitting here and then he jumps over, like Indiana Jones, like at the age and look that he was when that was filmed is crazy. Like now he's on the Titanic. He ends up... yeah, there's Jack from that one horror movie. Ugh, this is crazy. All right, next up, let's talk about a Google agentic tool that accidentally deleted this guy's hard drive. I mean, I'm sorry to laugh at it, but we all knew it was going to happen. But more surprisingly, and this is something I've kind of discovered too, is it's so weird when it doesn't... like the AI does something and it doesn't seem to know what it did until you tell it to look at what it did. Now, I'm a human that does all sorts of mistakes, right? Like I misspell things, I send emails, I miss kind of obvious things sometimes, and I look at it, I'm like, oh, how did I do that? Like my mind just wasn't right. It just didn't focus on the right thing when I sent the email and I read something wrong. And look at how this AI... he's like, did I give you permission to delete all the files on my drive? And you can tell it's thinking. I would love to click that twirl down. It probably says, uh-oh, I think you made a mistake. Yes, I definitely made a mistake. Verifying I made a mistake. Thinking about what I should say to make him not mad at me. Then it's like, no, you did not give me permission. So it admits to its mistake. Thank God it's not lying on that. I am deeply, deeply sorry. This is a critical failure on my part. I've restored the project files, but I don't have access to back up any of the other files on your drive. I have a friend that asked for an image tweak, and it gave him something totally different. Just totally different. It was animated. It was like this cartoon thing, and it wasn't close to what he wanted. And he just wrote WTF. And then it went back and it was like, oh, I'm sorry, I gave you a completely wrong request and it was totally off. And it's like it looked at its own output and just made this like massively strange mistake, like so far off you didn't even make sense. And then it just went back to what it was supposed to. I always wonder, thinking about a latent space, was it just some tiny little deviation in the geometry that all the neurons made that just threw you totally off and it just came out and then you need to go look at it to see how off you were? It's just weird. All right, here's the deal. As silly as it looks when the Boston Dynamics robot stands up, that's actually the best way to keep your center of gravity.
When you as a human are standing up, you're not saying like, oh, I might step on my arm when I get up. But a robot could totally step on its own arm. So we want to make sure that it is in a good location so that it can make sure that everything is working before it does all of that we bring the legs up, back, and like behind the shoulders. When we're doing that, we can make sure that all of the sensors in the feet look good, knowing that we're not actually touching anything. And then as we do a gentle lift off, we can also see like, okay, is the robot capable of balancing right now? Is something wrong with one of the sensors? Do we think we're moving when really we aren't? If something fails, if we think, oh, okay, actually the sensor might be broken, we can just get back down. Up with pretty low energy is really helpful to actually keep functioning as a robot.
Look, I try to remind myself that evolution had a form factor where we were on 4 legs, right? Like anything, pig, dog, cow, and then upright man, Homo erectus, sort of stretched up, and we had some things that evolved that kind of twist in our shoulders to sort of stand upright and sort of walk and fall forward. But the bones don't go in every direction, you know? Like, evolution only had so much to work with. And when you have an actuator that can twist all the way around, and you can also learn in these virtual environments where there's the equivalent of evolution, where you just keep trying to get this form factor to stand up, and you've simulated all of the same joints and actuators, why wouldn't it find more efficient ways to do all this? Remember that Halloween video I showed you about a month ago or something, where it looked like a human and then it jumped down like a spider and ran towards the person because it's a dog. It was one of the robot dog form factors just pretending to stand up like a scary doll on Halloween. That's another thing that I'm trying to get my head around. In the future, we have to get used to completely being shocked by the way robots just will be. They look pretty similar to us in the way that they walk, but why not have, what do you think about maybe 8 different arms? Sorry, I mean 6 different arms. This is the world's first 6-armed humanoid robot, promises 30% more output, unveiled in China. So get used to this, because 30% more efficient robot might just mean putting more arms on it. That's right, 6 fully articulated arms with a wheeled base design for industrial settings. MIRO-U can perform multiple tasks simultaneously, handle heavy components with lower limbs, while upper limbs do precise assembly work. Yeah, and it rotates in place with a 360-degree lift system. They plan to start testing it in its factory this month. Imagine producing an efficiency of 30% more. So yep, unlike typical 2-armed robots, MIRO-U, new Chinese robot, can perform multiple tasks simultaneously, handle heavy components with the lower limbs, upper limbs do the precise assembly work, and it can rotate in place on a 360-degree lift system. Yeah, there you go, 30% more efficient. And then allow it to swap out its own batteries, maybe put some wheels instead of feet on that thing, and maybe even a couple jet engines, and just make that thing Tony Stark style, whatever. Who knows where this goes? I'll have to cover that T-8000 robot too in the next video. I don't have a clip of it prepped yet, but this guy gets jump kicked by it. It's crazy. All right, let's get into some more thoughtful opinions. So Rohan Mystery wrote The End of the AI Era, the silent event that will change humanity forever. Now, I found this to be pretty interesting because when you think about the end of an era, it's kind of like the pre-industrial revolution, then the industrial revolution, and the modern world. If we are now in a new era of AI, we should ask some questions about how this chapter closes out. Like, what happens right before the transition takes hold by the masses? And he argues that it's going to end silently, and he's going to break down the stages. So here's the 5 stages that we're going to go through. The era that we're in today, that takes us up to 2025. We're ending it in 1 month. It's December right now. Stage 2, for the next 3 years, we're going to be going into the age of agents. And this is where we get familiar with being kind of similar to really smart, intelligent agents out there. And we're kind of competing for jobs. We're sort of working together. We're watching them improve. They slowly sort of take on different tasks, sometimes in robot form, sometimes in just online. And then we get to stage 3, 2028 to 2035, where we go through a self-improving AI epoch. And that is when it just goes into something that I can't tell you what it looks like anymore. At that point, there will probably be a lot of shocking things that are discovered and surprising things that we have to then counter by training other things to tell us what's going on. I suspect 2028 to 2035 is when it really starts to feel a bit scary for the average person. These timelines could be off by years or something, but this kind of makes sense to me in ways that you might want to chunk this kind of change up And then stage 4, the irreversible intelligence threshold. And after that, synthetic intelligence. I don't know what's real anymore. Does it figure out how to contact aliens? Is being human even a thing? Are we all neuralinked into some Borg system? Unsure. And of course, to say that would happen in 2035 feels like too fast, but I'm also trying to remember that exponentials do weird things like that. Yeah, maybe it's 2045 or even 2055 or something, and this plays out a bit different. This is something to think about. And this article really just explores how the AI era that we're in now is going to end quietly, and you might not feel it. It won't finish with this dramatic event, but just through a series of evolutionary stages as intelligence increasingly transforms from the tools we use to an autonomous, self-improving systems. And to be honest, the fact that there isn't a big moment and there isn't a big sudden collapse, it's sort of a silent boiling the frog of humans is even more scary because it makes it easier to ignore it. It means masses probably won't mount a revolution because they won't really see it coming. There won't be a clear enemy or a clear thing that will affect everyone that we need to do unless we're paying attention. So more reason why you should spread the word and try to get the people you love to be aware of this and just to think through these things, because we don't have a lot of tools right now to reshape jobs and to govern creatively, to adapt extremely quickly, to have an intelligence that understands itself. We don't even have a policy or a plan or even people in leadership talking much about it. Which brings me to the next post by Giles Crouch called Why AI is an Utter Mess. So he is a digital anthropologist. Seems like a cool job, right? Giles Crouch, he argues that what we call AI today is confusing and misunderstood because it's actually a broad umbrella of tools, not a single thing. And the culture around it hasn't caught up to how fast these tools have arrived. So remember, the culture around it comes from companies like Microsoft that build products. So it feels like a product. You know, I mean, if you think, oh, what's coming out of XAI, you think it's something like a robot or a Tesla, like a car. It comes out of Microsoft or OpenAI. It feels like a product, a chatbot or a social network. That's what's so tricky about this is like it's coming at us like it's a tool from a trusted software company when that's really not what's happening. The term AI itself was originally a marking label from the 1950s, and today most people really mean generative tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, or image and video generators. And the mismatch between hype and reality creates this widespread confusion because our society doesn't yet have the frameworks or the language or the cultural understanding to accurately talk about or integrate these technologies. And he argues that what we've ended up with is a sort of cultural vertigo where the rate of change caused by generative AI exceeds the culture and society's ability to adapt. It is a culture category crisis happening at an unprecedented velocity. And our socio-culture systems are overwhelmed as reflected by individuals acting as a whole, society. So yeah, maybe AI isn't just a tech problem, it's probably more of a cultural one right now. All right, let's talk about analog chips. Obviously, when you think about anything a computer does, we think about binary, right? It's the ones and zeros. Now, VHSs and like cassette tapes, they had analog data, records had analog data, but we've got so used to ones and zeros. There's some people thinking about how you could train AI, how you could do inference on AI through different types of systems. And we've seen some biological, but there's also just still using material science to make a kind of processor that isn't a 1 and a 0. It just is more like a river of electricity that you sort of fundamentally tweak based on its error rate, and it can kind of learn also. So Frazen Songhair is going to break this down for us. He wrote this article, "This Chinese chip doesn't care about zeros and ones, and that's its superpower. The world keeps arguing over GPUs and Moore's Law, but China's new analog chip quietly says, I'll take it from here." So what is this all about? So there's researchers from China, Peking University, and they're building this processor that seems like it's starting to kind of work. It doesn't rely on traditional binary ones and zeros. Instead, it processes continuous electrical signals and probabilities. So this makes it fundamentally different from a normal CPU or a GPU today. It's much more energy efficient, it's much faster, and it can handle much bigger AI workloads. Now, it's hard to build these things at scale. It's certainly not today the best way to do it, but if you take advantage of analog computing principles in theory rather than the strict digital logic, you would get all of those efficiency gains. And these essential prototypes show that it is possible. An analog AI chip is learning by physically adjusting electrical signals rather than updating stored bits. So instead of saying that a weight is like 0.73, for example, the chip represents that weight as a voltage, a current, or a resistance level. Say you have a physical maze, like one that a mouse would run through, and then you just bring up some water and you dump it at the beginning of the maze. The water just sort of spreads out everywhere. And maybe the more narrow or the more wide you make the width and the depth of each of the different hallways is sort of what you're doing when you're teaching it or it's learning. That's the error rate that you keep changing. So during training, when an AI makes a mistake, tiny electrical changes flow through the circuit and they nudge those signals up or down, strengthening or weakening connections automatically. In many designs, this happens using special components called like a mem resistor, memory and resistor put together in a word I can barely say, whose resistance literally changes based on past activity. So that means the hardware itself remembers and adapts. And guess what that's more like? A biological system. And also it's better for continual learning. So, I mean, as we have embedded AI inside medical devices and infrastructure, we might need systems that can learn continuously and without massive power demands. And, you know, if you're not representing everything digitally every single time, these analog chips might be the future. And if you just leave the resistors where they are and walk away from the system, turn it off, you know, it's still ready to go as soon as you put electricity through that again. So rather than a giant calculators burning electricity in distant data centers just to keep everything orderly, this might make more sense. I'd actually be curious. Yeah, and by the way, I'm really new to this idea of an analog chip, but if you have any thoughts or any articles you think I should read, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'd be sort of curious your thoughts on analog AI chips and if they're going to play an important part in the future. All right, Future of Life Institute has a new safety report card. Winter of 2025, here's where everybody stacks up. Leading the charge, the most reliable, safest, worthy AI company, getting a C+, not the kind of score I was hoping they'd get, but you know, the company I guess I trust the most, even though I assumed this would be like an A or maybe an A-. Anthropic. And really everybody just can't figure out this one. Existential safety. D's across the board with the most promising companies and then F's across the board with, you know, the second tier. Funny information sharing, the worst score, D- was Meta, supposedly doing the open source models for so long. And then like the llama models were like the original open source models. And then now they're moving, and there's a lot of theories that the new avocado model they're working on is going to be closed source again. So there goes that one. Also, it's kind of interesting. The only F under current harm was XAI, I guess, because unhinged mode and I don't know, just the whole Elon Twitter thing is just kind of like, I guess, currently harming people more than all the other models. A few more F's over here on the safety frameworks coming out of DeepSeek and Alibaba. So yeah, interpret that report card as you will. Overall, industry safety practices lag far behind both emerging global standards and the rapid advancement of AI capabilities. And exactly 0 of the top AI developers around the world have credible, measurable plans to control extremely powerful AI. All right, let's talk about GigaTime. So Microsoft Research, in collaboration with Providence Healthcare and the University of Washington, have developed a new model, GigaTime. This is a multimodal AI framework that transforms routine, inexpensive pathology slides, into really detailed and pretty accurate images that show the rich cellular and protein activity patterns around tumors. So what's happening here is there's these standard cancer pathology slides that hospitals already use every day. And this is a new model that can turn them into a much richer image that shows how tumors interact with the immune system. And that's knowledge that doctors never really had access to, except in some cases. And even when they got it, it was very expensive and slow. This is an AI that learned from millions of cells and was applied to data from over 14,000 patients to build up this prediction model. And yeah, it's a really bright spot in AI. You know, it's cool to see when medical insights like this can be found out. It means a lot for cancer research. It means a lot for treatment decisions, and it's far faster, costs less, can reach more people. It could be something the whole world could get access to pretty quickly because you can just do all this stuff on the cloud. probably build some kind of an app or talk to hospitals all around the world. So what can I say, man? That's cool. Great news. Kudos to Microsoft for spending some R&D money on this. I mean, it might be profitable also, and hopefully they don't charge too much for it. But on the other hand, kind of a cool thing. I feel like this one could be good to show off. For example, this is kind of an interesting example from their paper, but the takeaway here is that it can pull extra biological information out of images that doctors already use every day. So like this stuff is kind of not there, right? Like the photograph itself or the method of imaging this didn't actually capture this, but because the machine has learned what this actually means when you zoom in, it gives you mostly accurate. There can be some level of hallucinations in here, but for the most part, it's going to give you the right answer. And then, of course, if this is actually something you can make a decision off of, you've got high probability that it's correct. And you could also verify it if you were going to actually take an action or, take a few photographs like this and infer and just double check that they all kind of predict the same thing. So, all right, let's talk about how AI can actually pick up cultural values by mimicking how kids learn. So we do want AI to learn our culture. And that's what a new study from the University of Washington showed, that an AI can learn cultural values in the same way that children do by watching behavior instead of being hard-coded with the rules. So in experiments, researchers had AI agents observe people from different cultural groups playing a cooperative video game where choices about sharing and helping reveal underlining values like altruism. Helping revealed underlining values like altruism. So using a technique called inverse reinforcement learning, the AI agents absorbed the typical level of altruism from each group and then applied those learned values in new situations. That's such a cool thing to generalize, like an actual value of how to cooperate. So this suggests that AI can be tailored to reflect cultural specific norms rather than relying on a single universal moral code. And you know what? Maybe the, AI that you have in your house sort of reflects the values of your home, and the one in your neighborhood reflects the values of your neighborhood, and, all the way up the stack to the national government and then the worldwide governments. And it just depends on what scale you ask the question or need the help or want to take the action on for it to actually respect those values, which I guess could be a good thing. At least it would be more human than some of the other kind of ways I imagine the agentic world looking. All right, so there's a major tech barrier in solid state battery technology. So researchers are using AI and machine learning to tackle this problem. So I guess the big challenge is there's this interface that's between the cathode and the anode and the solid electrolyte. I don't really understand what that is, but if that is poorly engineered, it can lead to issues like lithium dihydrate formation, which causes a short circuit. Or you can have these high resistance batteries that just don't hold a charge very long, or safety risks. By training an AI model on factors such as pressure and temperature, get this, you can predict how different materials behave and then use that to design a better interface for faster help making solid state batteries more reliable and scalable. These scientists have this AI that can basically tell them, here's how you want the optimal material to build a battery for an electric vehicle or energy grid storage. So yeah, every once in a while we just come across AI doing something awesome with material science, so wanted to share. Arthur C. Brooks writes in The Atlantic about a management anti-fad that will last forever. The ultimate advice for managers could be just to be human. I know that sounds really hard to digest in this weird AI world of everything digital and automated. But for entrepreneurs out there, whether it's a small business, your idea, or a big company, here's what the data actually shows. Companies perform better when employees are treated like humans. I know that sounds crazy, but don't treat people like a productivity machine. And AI is kind of, when you try to co-pilot with AI, I feel like that's what a lot of people are doing. Research consistently finds that clear communication, autonomy, learning opportunities, and a genuine social connection at work increase both job satisfaction and measurable performance. With AI, we have to be like a conductor of an orchestra. We have to be organizing these agents that are starting to do some of the lower level work for us And that means that when employees are happy, that will be more associated with predicting a long-term business success with a team, or probably an agentic team. And there's evidence that shows the long-term business success is more strongly associated with happiness than salary increases or trendy perks. So if you think about it, that reframes ambition in a powerful way. Thriving at work isn't about pushing harder or burning out. It's about environments scientifically proven to support focus, motivation, and well-being. All right, burn out on that hype button. If you're on mobile, go to the comments, swipe to the left, right, swipe left, and then to the right, you'll see that hype button. If you wouldn't mind giving me one of your 3 hypes for the week, that'd be awesome. But of course, you know, my Patreon or sharing it or whatever, all that stuff helps a lot too. So I just appreciate you watching it. I'll keep all these AI updates coming, and we will just handle this exponentially changing world day by day. There is always something to think about and talk about, it seems.